Hey Rachel,
Hey Luis, what's up?
how are you?
I'm marvelous.
You look refreshed and ready to go.
I kind of feel it. It's nice to talk about art, right? It's always a
Yeah.
refreshing thing to do.
Listen, I am so moved by your recent project,
Mm.
Shoulders of Giants, and I was lucky enough to be part of that. Can you tell us a little bit about the scope of this, I want to say, kind of monumental project you took on?
Yeah, it's funny that you say monumental because I was just thinking this morning about the pressure that I put on myself in this project. And I think you and I have kind of had conversations around the things that happened during quarantine, right? And the things that have happened as a result of this pandemic. And I realized through actually a conversation with you during your birthday party that a lot of what I've been doing in putting these kind of deadlines and big projects in my life is kind of a control mechanism,
Mm.
right? Because there's so much craziness going on in the world right now and so much uncertainty that I put this 30 paintings in 30 days project on myself without really thinking, oh my God, that's a lot of work. So monumental is right. It's been an absolute amazing journey, but it's been a lot of work.
What was the biggest surprise for you?
I think the two things really, I think one is how little I knew.
Mm.
And two is the amount of bias in our own community.
Mm.
That one has been a little bit of a kick up to me.
So, Shoulders of Giants was basically every day you created a painting, mixed media that spotlighted a heroine hero leader in the LGBTQ community, right?
Hmm. Yep.
And how big were these paintings?
So they're pretty big. So, one of the things that kind of came out of quarantine for me is I started working on large scale paper. Actually, this piece you see behind me is about 9 foot tall. And it was mainly kind of a cost reason, really, because, buying big canvases is so expensive. And I was working on wood for a little while. And while that's a lot cheaper, it's also really bulky. And I don't have a huge studio. So I started to work on paper. And there was something about working on paper that felt a little bit less final than working on a canvas or working on wood. So I felt a lot more free in my process, like in how I was approaching the work, because it didn't feel like, oh, this has to be perfect. So I was really able to just experiment with, what I was, the different approaches, the different mediums, the different materials. So the pieces are 53 by 40 ish, kind of around that size, which is like 3 foot by 4 foot.
You're in New
So
York City. You're in the New York area. I mean, yeah, that's colossal for
it,
the tri-state
it's
area.
huge, and it's actually presented a little bit of a challenge for framing them because obviously they are so large. So the frames are coming out, a little bit on the higher end, and they have to be custom built. So that's kind of something I didn't really foresee. But it's such a I don't know. I've never really been able to work small. Like I can do it kind of here and there, but when I really have something that I'm passionate about, I need to see it like in like not life size, but I need to see the impact of it. So it's been really fun, but getting to the point when you have 30 of these in your apartment and they're, this monumental size, I had to build a whole rig in my studio where I could store them, where they wouldn't be in sunlight. And
Wow.
yeah, so
I
it's
don't
an
know.
experience.
I don't know if I could name 30 leaders, heroes, heroines in the LGBT community. How did you go about finding them?
So it's really interesting because initially, the reason, kind of the motivation behind the project was I every time around this time every year around this time even, I start to think about Edie Windsor because Edie was just she's my hero. She's my wife and I. We have a very personal connection to Edie in that, the action that she took to sue the U.S. Government to strike down the Defense of Marriage Act really had an impact on our life, like a monumental impact. It allowed me to stay in the U.S. with my wife. It allowed her to sponsor me for my green card, which at the time I was, my status was that I would have had to leave pretty soon. So it was a huge, huge thing. So I think about her every year, and I started to think I really want to do a painting of Edie. I really want to create something that honors her. And so, I did this one piece, and I was like, wow, like this feels like exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And then I thought, but there's so many other people in this movement, the LGBTQ movement and the quest for LGBTQ rights that I only really know the names of. I don't know the stories. And so I started to think about other people who were, instrumental in moving us forward and allowing me and you and, our partners to move around the world freely. And I kind of came up with the big six, I want to call them. So it was like Harvey Milk, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, obviously, as you know, you wrote a beautiful letter. Laverne Cox, somebody more contemporary, but certainly, a real voice for change and acceptance. And Bayard Rustin as well. So, I started to do my research and, found out just amazing things about the contributions that these people have made. And I thought, I feel something doesn't feel right about me telling their story, because I can't speak to the experience of a trans person. I can't speak to the experience of a person of color, or anybody who's not a cis white lesbian. I have no business telling that story, right? So that was really where the idea came, that let me reach out to people that I know and have gotten to know in the community over the years, and see if they would be interested in contributing a letter. And I was just absolutely overwhelmed by the response.
That's
Like, it was
so
amazing.
powerful. I mean, I think it's one thing to have a creative inquiry, right? Which is so important for people to embark on. But then to kind of invite people in and give them an opportunity to be part of your work is so powerful. And you were able to do that in such a balanced way. Because sometimes it's hard to collaborate. You're worried about, okay, I don't want to take the message behind what I'm doing and give it away too much. But you were able to create a perfect balance of to give your work its space and also create an opportunity for others to come in and give their perspective. I was so touched to be able to write my letter to Sylvia Rivera, and while I was familiar with her story, with her journey, to have an excuse and a purpose to really dive in a little bit more was, one, really painful, and two, so enlightening and recharging to be like, oh right, we literally are standing on these people's shoulders, and we're kind of, and this is from another saying, we're kind of drunk on the well that they've dug, like we owe so much and we can keep going. What has been some of the reaction from some of the other artists you collaborated with?
So, well, it's interesting because it was not just artists. It was, I started initially with artists, and then I really just expanded my search to people that I'd gotten to know in all aspects of life. And I think what the most interesting thing was, and I think that this is why it was just perfect timing to do this, was how moved people were by what was happening right in that moment in time, right? This happened just like I started the project right after George Floyd had passed away. So there was this, this rise of unrest and, just this raw, kind of palpable energy in the world, right? We've gone through this pandemic, and now, yes, people are saying Black Lives Matter. Like, this is real. People are angry right now. So a lot of the letters that I got back really reflected that. That emotion was like, I can't believe I'm having to say this again, but here we are, we're here again. Yes, Stonewall was a riot, right? How many times have we seen that, on social? Stonewall was a riot. It was a riot. It was an uprising based on police brutality, right? And how many of our community know that? I didn't really understand that. I'm guilty of thinking, yay, a pride parade, some gay people did something, and now we have a big celebration. It was police brutality.
Absolutely.
And that's the reality of that. And it was because we, or gay people at that time, were being abused. And that's what's happening in society today for for people of color. And so it just felt very, very timely to do this, and so many of those letters just really, really reflected that. So that was just an incredible thing to see.
I think also giving a platform to do that, to champion these heroes um, at this moment is so important because it's so easy to just to be really angry and kind of give in, you know,
Yeah.
especially as artists, we're sensitive to things that are happening, and it weighs, it's heavy, especially if you've been aware of this, right? So to be able to be constructive, to be productive with your time, and not only that, but also give a platform, I think is commendable on your part to, because it takes energy. It really takes energy to not only be creative, but also to connect with people on a level that's uplifting, not
Mm.
just commiserating on how horrible things are, right? So I really got that in working with the project. So thank you for that. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you for being involved. I think one of the biggest discoveries for me, like going through this, was once I got kind of 5 or 6 into the project, like 5 or 6 of 30, I was like, this project is so big, so much, so bigger than me as an artist. Like this is not about me, right? This is not Rachel Wilkins' art career. This is a tool. Like what we're doing right now and this work, and I say we, and I keep referring to the series as we because it's not me, right? The artwork may be the catalyst and the vehicle to tell these stories, and that's fine. Like I am totally fine with that because if it changes one person's perspective, or if it informs somebody who, like me, was not aware of certain people who, allowed me to live my life this way, then it's a success. And it's not about getting some kind of, I don't know, increasing my credibility or my street or, selling it. It's about what it can accomplish.
Absolutely, and it really felt that way. Let me ask you a funny question. Do you
Mm.
think the project would have looked different if you had created it in England, at
Mm.
home?
Ooh, I think I would have looked different if I'd have still been there. That's an interesting question. I think that being in New York, where the Stonewall riots happened, and spending a lot of time there when I first moved to New York, I lived in that neighborhood. Like, I think there's a heartbeat there, right? There's a heartbeat at that little crossroads, right? At Christopher Street and
Sheridan Square.
Sheridan Square. Thank you. With the statues, and there's a sense of this is the center of the gay universe right here. So I would say, not that there are not people, in the UK that I would have perhaps focused on, but I think that having that experience of living here and being here and getting to know, the community, that really is part of the spark that inspires, this exploration.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, I'm all about decentralizing New York. I think it's a little overrated and overpriced, but there's definitely something to see the space and to be in that energy. And those sculptures that are by George Segal,
Mm-hmm.
these white sculptures that kind of look like ghosts in time, are so important because you're right. It does feel very palpable, and even though it's definitely a party scene because it's like their clubs, their bars, in the stillness of it, it's a charged energy, right? Like this heartbeat you're talking about. Absolutely.
So those, sorry,
No, go ahead.
I just want a little tidbit there. So those George, oh my gosh, I always forget his last name.
Seagull.
Gal, yes, his sculptures. I've actually met the two women that modeled for the
Wow.
well, yeah, they're actually a friend of a friend. Their names are Leslie and Beth, and they're in their late 60s now at this point, and they're still together.
How amazing is that? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so.
they have a crazy story. Their story is like actually she's just having her life story. Leslie's had their life story published by a publisher, so you're probably going to see a little bit more about that. But yeah, they were the original models that posed for that. It's kind of
That's
crazy.
so beautiful, right? Because like, we even now, we don't see enough of these like happy ever after stories of
Mhm.
gay couples, of lesbians, of just people that don't look like Cinderella and the Prince, right? So it's really beautiful to hear about these things. And I mean, yeah, I'm just it's really beautiful to have these stories being told. And I'm really curious, what's the next step? Because it's such a big project, and I feel like it has so many other. It can live on so many other levels. I have my own ideas, but what are some of your ideas of how this can
Sure.
reiterate?
So I think the first thing is that I want it to be like I mentioned, I want it to be a tool for education. So a tool to expand people's opinions or change biases, hopefully, or for people to reflect a little bit and understand their history. So I would like it to be, obviously it's a little bit of a weird time in terms of what the institutions are scheduling for shows and things like that, but hoping to get it into some kind of institution, hopefully something to do with LGBTQ history, rights, whatever that may look like. I am in contact with a couple of museums, just at the pitching stage right now. So that's kind of interesting. And then, I don't feel like it's done. Like, I feel like there's so much more and so many unsung heroes that perhaps I wouldn't discover in my research. And that's actually been an interesting twist is, when I started to talk about this online, I had somebody come up to me or digitally reach out to me and say, that you really should do something on this person. Here's their contribution and here's how they really are affecting my life right now. So that's been really amazing. And that's actually why I created the piece of Cecilia Gentili. She's a transgender activist based in Queens, and she's doing the work right now. And that's kind of where I feel that we will go. We'll continue to do this. And, I have this kind of weird goal in my head, and you're probably going to laugh at me about this, but it's a weird thing that's been on my bucket list since I was about 5 years old. I want to have a Guinness World Record. It's the cheesiest, stupidest thing ever.
Yes, do it. I stand by you.
I thought, wouldn't this be really cool if this could be the biggest standalone collection of individuals who contributed to LGBTQ advancement ever?
Yes.
Now that would be really, really cool.
Well,
that's not like a Guinness World Record of like who can eat the most marshmallows, which maybe I'll go down that road instead because I'll probably be really good at that. But
I think you can do both, honestly. One will feed the other, I'm sure. But I mean, so I'm a huge mystic. I am a huge proponent of the tarot. I love the tarot, the images. So in thinking of your project, I'm like, wow, these would be beautiful cards, and to be able to. And, with the tarot, you can kind of pick a card and just meditate on it. And each one has its own meaning. So to randomly be able to pick a gay hero, a queer hero, a transgender hero, and tap into that energy is so powerful. Because it's a tool of meditation. It's a tool for usually people who don't have power, right? So yeah, I just think it's kind of genius. There's just so many things you can do with it. And I'm really excited to see what you will do with it.
Yeah, and I think that with the amount of letters and the like how poignant the letters are and how profound the letters are, for people to read that even in a book, like I think that there's a possibility there. If I can, I think we have about 24 letters at this point, so we don't have the full 30 yet. But I think once we get to that point, that I would maybe start to reach out to some publishers. But that one of the big things about this project that has been amazing, and again, why it's not just about me as an artist, is that we're donating 50% of the profits. So anything that sells, 50% is going right to the task force, which is the LGBTQ task force, and they're doing amazing work, and they're not hugely funded. So the work that they're doing is real issues faced by our community. It's like homelessness, it's education, it's healthcare. So I hope that if we do anything commercial with it, which I think, is possible, that we would continue to be able to, pick at least, a nonprofit that really needs the help and then donate whatever we can to them.
Absolutely. Now, what advice would you give to an artist out there that is planning to do an ambitious undertaking of just creative inquiry? What are your three tips that you've learned from this experience?
One of the biggest things that somebody told me once was say yes and figure out how to do it afterwards.
Sure.
And I think that's probably how I've run my businesses, how I've run my life. We always assume that we shouldn't do something until we're quote unquote ready. guess what? You're not ever going to be ready to do it. So, put the commitment out there and, just do it. Just get to work. And, it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as you are willing to, do the legwork, which is, it's going to take some legwork, something like an inquiry like this. And also make sure it's something that you're really passionate about. One of the beautiful things about creating this work was for each subject, while I created it, I either listened to a podcast about that person or, for example, when I created, the piece of Melissa Etheridge, I listened to her music for like 2 days. Like I was so absorbed in the subjects that it didn't feel like work. So I think, it's got to be something that you're passionate about. Absolutely commit to it before you do it, before you're ready. And then, I think one of the biggest, and this is more on the kind of the business side of things, but start the business side of it as soon as you start the project. Like start making those connections, start to reach out to your network, let people know what you're doing, tell the press, put out a press release. Like don't wait to be like, and now I have this amazing collection. Like get those wheels in motion like right away. And you've got much more of it, a chance of this being featured or, the word growing about what it is.
I'm so glad you said that because I think a lot of times as artists, we kind of put the cart in front of the horse. Is that a saying? We totally forget. We don't forget. We put it off because it's a scary endeavor, and it's just such a nice space to be in the creative milieu with the music and the dirty hands. But it's so important. I think, especially right now, as everything is shifting, we have so much leverage now to decide what it's going to look like, and opportunities for business, who you do business with. It doesn't have to be the galleries anymore. It doesn't have to be anyone. You choose. So I think that's such an amazing tip. So thank you for that.
And one last little tip on that would be the rule of 15. So if you can do something for 15 minutes a day to move your art business forward, what is your art business going to look like in 90 days? What is it going to look like in a year?
Yes. I just said that to somebody yesterday. I am so glad and you're right. And what is 15 minutes? It's not even a whole sitcom,
Yeah, and you can do a lot in 15 minutes. You can send 10 emails in 15 minutes if you work smarter, not harder. If you template your press release, then you could send that to 15 media outlets. If you do that for a week, you're going to get a hit. It's just inevitable.
Absolutely. Oh, I love
so
that. I love that.
That's more on the business. I can't help but switch into art business mode
it's so
when I'm
important.
serious artist,
It's so important, and it's not it's not how I operate automatically. I really have to turn the vinyl disc over so I can play that. But you brought it up. I took your free masterclass, and I was just blown away by how much value and information you were giving. And I don't mean to plug you, but I really am because you brought up some things I was like, oh shoot, you're right. I shouldn't put all my eggs in this basket. I should diversify. You know what I mean? And it's just really good to speak with artists who are willing to share that knowledge. So thank you for that as well. I'm just thank you.
Absolutely,
it's fantastic. And how do artists reach you for that for the business aspect?
So, my signature course is Art Biz Bootcamp. So that's just artbizbootcamp.com. We did just close the class, but we're going to open it again in October. We close it really so that I can be kind of alongside that particular class for 6 weeks because I do 6 weeks of coaching calls. So I don't want it to be, people coming in at different times. So we're going to open it again in October. And then, I do these free kind of pop-up things here and there, one-day workshops and classes. The best way to really keep up with them would be to look up, let me give you the correct information. On Facebook, we have a free group, which is just Sell Your Art Masterclass. It looks like that. You can see that.
Fantastic. I'll put a picture of it.
Yeah, so we do some pop-up things in there and little, giveaways and freebies and things. And then obviously that's where you would learn about any classes that we have coming up as well.
That's great. But that's fantastic. So if you're listening, please look into it. And I wouldn't endorse anything that I don't fully believe in. So I'm really excited about.
I appreciate that. I'm excited for you, not to get, to pull you into this, but I'm going to. You're starting to teach as well.
I am, and we were just talking about it. So I've been doing it forever, right? I've been working with artists all my life. I've been really lucky. Um, and along the way, I kind of became, when you're a curator, you kind of become a therapist. You learn how to
Yeah.
hold people's hands. And when you come from a turbulent background, you learn how to cope with things and just make them work. So these
Yeah.
two components just really, I've always been able to work with artists and help them out the best way I can. And in doing like a review of that, I realized, oh, this is a service that I should be offering. And structuring it so it's not only beneficial for one side or the other, but it's kind of like baking a cake, right? Like, how selfish of me to bake this cake and only give it to a friend of mine. So it's opening it up and inviting people to the table. So yes, it's been really, really exciting to be able to work with artists on that level.
That's amazing.
It really is. And I mean, and I think, again, the timing, right? It's just such an important time for people to be like, okay, I can make things happen right now. Because all bets are off. All bets are
Yep.
off, Now, let me ask you to close. Did you write a letter to somebody yourself?
I did not, purely because I felt like I have so much of a hand in the art side of it, that I chose not to. If I were to write one, it would be to Edie.
What would you
And
say?
well, fortunately, I got to actually thank her in person a couple of times. I actually met her 3 times on 3 separate occasions. But there's see, now this is difficult because I'm in your shoes now.
Yeah.
So it,
Yeah,
it's
I
so
cried. I cried as I was writing my letter.
yeah, so much weight, like in what I would want to say, like how you fundamentally changed everything about my life, everything that I have today, spiritually, emotionally, my mental health, my sobriety, like all of these things are because of the contribution that you made, because you were fearless and fierce. And you, as an octogenarian, took on the mighty US government. Like, how do you ever say thank you? One of the most beautiful, beautiful things to come out of this whole experience is that Edie actually remarried, and later in life, like 3 years before she passed away, and her spouse actually bought the piece.
Oh, wow.
So, I actually get to drive out there probably next week and take the piece to the house where Edie lived, and that piece is going to hang on her wall. And talk about a full circle moment.
That's
You know,
amazing. That's amazing.
so there's so much I would want to say, and perhaps I will at some point, contribute from that side. But I just felt like my heart was so in that painting, that was my way of expressing it to her.
Well, well done. And I'm so honored to have the opportunity to say thanks on my end.
Um,
And
so grateful.
I'm excited to see where this goes. So,
Me too.
Rachel, thank you for your time, and we'll chat again soon.
Thank you, Louise. Always a pleasure.
There is a pause button somewhere. Hold on.